So imagine you are just mindlessly scrolling through your feed on a Tuesday afternoon, right?
We've all been there.
Yeah, exactly. You are swiping past the usual blur, the, standard talking heads, the polished consultants sitting in front of those, like, perfectly color-coordinated bookshelves.
Right, the standard studio setups.
Yeah, but then suddenly your thumb just stops
Mm.
because you are staring at a creator who is meticulously painting themselves into, like, a cybernetic alien.
Complete with, optical illusion, prosthetics, and the whole works.
Exactly. But instead of talking about sci-fi or special effects, they are delivering this masterclass on, well, B2B marketing strategies and client acquisition.
And that right there, that cognitive dissonance, that is the entire point. Your brain expects a certain visual package for business advice.
Yeah, a suit and a tie.
Exactly. So when that expectation is completely shattered by wearable art, I mean, you literally can't help but pause. And that pause is the most valuable currency in the digital economy right now.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are unpacking this really unexpected, but honestly wildly fascinating intersection of industries. We pulled this directly from a stack of industry notes on modern content strategy.
Yep.
And our mission today is to figure out how this highly visual art of creative makeup is colliding head-on with digital media strategy, podcasting, and artificial intelligence.
And specifically, we are looking at the trends emerging around this upcoming event called the Podcast Summit.
Right. Because at first glance, you would think, okay, makeup and podcasting, those are two totally different worlds.
Completely different.
But as we're going to see, this single creative makeup video is being used as a foundational content engine for podcasters, educators, and entrepreneurs.
Yeah, and for anyone listening, whether you are a business owner trying to scale a brand or a consultant or just someone looking to grow a community from scratch, understanding this blueprint could completely change your workflow.
It really could. Because it's fundamentally about reverse engineering how audience attention actually works today.
It is.
So let's start with the first major takeaway from the sources. There is this massive push right now for makeup lovers and creators to go all in on creative makeup. And it's described as this highly exciting, important trend.
Yeah, and we should probably clarify what the sources actually mean by creative makeup here, because we aren't talking about, just doing a nice smoky eye for a night out.
Right, this isn't the basic contouring tutorial.
No, far from it. The text specifically redefines creative makeup as a strategic, multi-layered tool. We are talking about intricate body paint, special effects, prosthetics, transformative illusions.
Kind of wearable art that takes hours and hours to apply.
Exactly. And the sources frame this not as a beauty routine, but as a vehicle for podcasters and speakers to drastically expand their voice and their visibility. They are telling creators to think bigger.
Which, it feels like a massive leap, right? Like face paint as a strategic tool for a podcaster.
It sounds crazy at first.
It does.
Yeah.
But then you look at the mechanics of attention, and it actually starts to click. Think of a creative makeup look as the visual equivalent of, say, an incredibly catchy podcast intro track or, a really striking, provocative book cover.
Right. It's the hook.
Yeah, it does all the heavy lifting of audience acquisition. It buys you those 3 seconds of attention you desperately need, just so your actual message, the audio, the storytelling, the community building, so all of that can take over.
And if we break down the psychology of why this works, the sources explain it perfectly. It comes down to pattern interrupts. We live in an era of infinite content supply, right?
Oh, totally.
So audio alone or a standard video of someone sitting comfortably in a chair, it just no longer breaks through the noise organically.
Because our brains have adapted to filter that out as standard information.
Exactly. But when a consultant or a podcaster is in full cinematic special effects makeup, the brain has to literally halt its scrolling reflex just to process the visual anomaly.
The visual distinctiveness basically hacks the retention metrics.
It does. And what's really crucial here is the separation of roles.
How do you mean?
Well, the visual art, the alien transformation, the optical illusion, that serves as the anchor to capture the audience. But the spoken content, the actual podcast element playing over the visual, that is what retains them.
Oh, I see. You stay for the visual spectacle, but you subscribe and buy in because of the expertise being shared.
Yes. It allows creators to build a real bedrock for a media platform and drive monetization because they are instantly recognizable.
The juxtaposition is brilliant, really. The visual story, the application of the makeup, the transformation from human to alien. It provides this continuous, satisfying arc for your eye to follow, while the audio story provides the intellectual value.
You're feeding two different parts of the viewer's brain simultaneously.
Which brings us to the actual mechanics of it all.
Yeah.
Because the sources move from this theory of attention into some hard operational strategy, right?
Yeah, they outline a very specific methodology for how this art is actually deployed in the beauty and makeup communities.
Right, this idea of a content engine. Because it's not just about, turning on a camera, doing a wild look, and hoping for the best.
Not at all. They treat a single creative makeup session as the genesis of a massive interconnected web. The text refers to this as building a full content engine.
Let's break down the exact architecture of this engine because the efficiency here is staggering.
Yeah, so imagine a creator sits down for a 2-hour live stream or maybe a 40-minute long-form video.
Right, applying his complex makeup while delivering a keynote-level talk, or telling a story, or answering community questions.
Exactly. From that single anchor piece of media, the engine kicks in. The creator isn't just posting the long video and calling it a day.
Yeah.
They are scripting the audio narrative in advance alongside the visual transformation. They're shooting with the anticipation of how the final product will be sliced up. They're planning, they're editing smarter.
So they pull a high-speed time-lapse for one platform to showcase the pure artistry.
Yep. And then they pull high-resolution macro photography of the final details for another platform.
But wait, let me push back on that for a second.
Sure.
Because if you are taking a piece of highly intricate wearable art, this deeply personal transformation, and you're just chopping it up to feed a social media algorithm, just to win a sponsorship.
I see where you're going with this.
Doesn't that risk stripping the soul out of the art entirely? Like you're turning an artist into a factory worker on an assembly line of their own face.
Yeah.
If every brushstroke is calculated for a 15-second retention spike, are we even talking about art anymore?
That tension is arguably the defining conflict for modern creators right now, but the sources actually provide a really compelling synthesis for this.
Oh, really? How do they justify the machinery of it all?
Well, they emphasize that the core focus in the text isn't just a cynical grab for monetization. The engine functions entirely on the premise of community.
Community, okay.
Right, this hyper-segmented content works specifically because the creative makeup connects with an audience on an authentic, artistic level.
So the vulnerability, the actual performance, is still the anchor.
Yes, the audience is tuning in to witness the skill, the mistakes, the vulnerability, and the sheer time commitment of the artistic process, the machinery, the smart editing, the clip pulling, the repurposing.
Right.
That doesn't replace that intimacy. It acts as an amplifier. The sources argue that by constructing this engine, makeup lovers and creators are actually safeguarding their ability to make art.
Because they're building a sustainable, monetized platform that essentially acts as a patron for their own creativity.
Exactly that. The machinery serves the art by building the community around it, which in turn funds the next, more ambitious project. They're thinking bigger about their visibility, moving from independent artists to platform owners.
Okay, I actually really love that reframing. The engine isn't a compromise, it's a megaphone for the community building that is already happening natively.
It is.
But here is the reality check.
Yeah.
We just talked about pulling time lapses, isolating microclips of the best verbal advice, generating stills, and formatting all of this for different aspect ratios across like 5 different platforms.
It's a massive amount of work.
It sounds like a fast track to absolute burnout for a solo creator or even a small team. How are they physically operating this engine without a huge production budget?
This is exactly where the blueprint shifts from the beauty community and connects directly to podcasters and business owners. The catalyst that makes this entire multi-platform engine possible for a solo operator is artificial intelligence.
Ah, yes. Using AI in your podcast workflow. The engine room itself.
Right. If a creator wants to pull 40 pieces of micro content from one makeup video to build this media platform, AI isn't a luxury anymore. It is the fundamental infrastructure.
And the sources identify some very specific groups who are highly motivated to adopt these workflows, right? Podcasters, speakers, consultants, educators, entrepreneurs, business owners.
Because they are looking at these creative makeup artists and realizing they are losing the attention game. A business consultant sees an artist turn one 2-hour session into a highly monetized media empire, and they realize their standard audio file dropped onto an RSS feed is no longer competitive.
Right. They want to emulate the makeup artist engine. But manually finding the best hooks in a 2-hour audio file, transcribing them, adding dynamic graphics, I mean, that is a full-time job.
It used to take a dedicated production team days to execute what the sources describe, but let's look at how the AI actually functions here, because it is much more sophisticated than just randomly slicing video.
Yeah, dig into that. How is the AI determining what a good clip even is from a 2-hour makeup and business strategy session?
Think of the modern AI workflow as a digital prospector panning for gold in a river of content. It is analyzing multiple layers of data simultaneously.
Altoid.
Well, it's looking at the audio waveforms to track changes in the creator's vocal cadence, identifying moments where the voice raises in excitement or maybe slows down for emphasis.
Oh, wow. So it's listening for emotion.
Yes, and it uses natural language processing to scan the transcript in real time. It filters for highly emotive keywords, controversial statements, or structural cues like, here are 3 ways to do this, or the biggest mistake I made was.
Wait, so it's literally reading the narrative structure of the spoken podcast while analyzing the emotional delivery.
And in some cases, it's even tracking facial expressions and movement within the frame. The AI identifies the most engaging hooks, isolates the setup and the payoff, cuts the clip, formats it for vertical screens, and generates dynamic word-by-word captions.
Just to keep the viewer's eye moving.
Right. A workflow that historically required an editor, a copywriter, and a graphic designer is now executed by a solo creator in 30 minutes.
It fundamentally changes the math of content creation. You spend 90% of your energy on the actual art and the storytelling, the creative makeup and the podcast recording, and 10% on the distribution, rather than the other way around.
Which brings us to the cultural convergence point highlighted in the sources, the podcast summit.
Right.
The text points to this event as a critical physical and cultural gathering space. It is the intersection where the visual content engines perfected by the beauty community are actively merging with traditional podcasting and cutting-edge AI workflows.
It makes perfect sense that an event called the Podcast Summit is now a focal point for visual strategy. The industry is acknowledging a hard truth here. Audio and visual are no longer separate lanes. You can no longer categorize yourself as just an audio podcaster or just a visual artist.
The modern creator can't rely on a single medium. The Podcast Summit represents a paradigm shift where traditional knowledge-based creators, the educators, the consultants, they are realizing they have to adopt incredibly visual hooks to survive the current algorithms.
They are studying the makeup creators because the beauty community solved the visual acquisition problem years ago.
They did. They figured out how to make people stop scrolling, and now the podcasters are trying to map their audio expertise onto that visual framework using AI.
It's a fascinating cross-pollination of industries. If you are an entrepreneur trying to scale a brand right now, you can't just expect people to find your audio organically.
No, you can't.
You need the visual anchor to hack the algorithm, you need the content engine to build the community, and you need the AI workflow to process the sheer volume of media required to stay relevant.
And the sources convey a distinct sense of urgency about this. There is a window of opportunity right now where combining wearable art, high-level podcasting, and AI distribution is novel enough to dominate a niche.
But that window is closing.
It is. Soon, this highly layered multimedia approach won't be an innovative strategy. It will simply be the baseline expectation for anyone trying to build a platform.
The barrier to entry for quality has never been higher, even as the tools to produce it have never been more accessible.
That's the paradox of AI. It makes creating content easier, which means the only way to stand out is through extreme, unreplicable human creativity.
Like spending 4 hours turning yourself into an optical illusion while delivering a flawless business presentation.
Right. The AI can cut the clip, but it can't create the cognitive dissonance. Only the artist can do that.
We have covered massive ground today. We started by looking at the incredible push for creative makeup, not just as an aesthetic pursuit, but as a deeply strategic storytelling tool designed to short-circuit our scrolling habits.
Yep.
And then we unpack the architecture of the content engine, seeing how a single, vulnerable performance of wearable art is systematically transformed into a multi-platform web.
A web that drives monetization while protecting the community at its core.
Exactly. And we mapped the engine room itself, exploring how solo operators are utilizing sophisticated AI workflows, analyzing vocal cadence, natural language, and narrative structure to scale their art without burning out.
All of this culminating in industry-defining shifts seen at events like the Podcast Summit, where audio and visual strategies are permanently fusing.
It completely reframes how you look at the media you consume, and more importantly, how you view the media you create. So before we sign off, based on the blueprint we've analyzed today, what is a final provocative thought the listener should carry with them as they look at their own creative projects?
Well, if highly visual art forms like creative makeup are successfully being repurposed into foundational engines for diverse media platforms using AI, we have to look at the logical endpoint for the audio industry.
Okay.
We have to ask ourselves, how will this change the fundamental definition of a podcast in the next 5 years?
Oh, wow.
If extreme visual hooks become the primary prerequisite for feeding an AI content engine, will traditional audio-only podcasting eventually be forced to adopt a visual art form just to compete for visibility? Are we moving toward a future where having a microphone and a good idea is entirely irrelevant if you don't also have a cinematic visual anchor to deliver it?
That is a staggering implication. If the AI prospector needs a visual anomaly to mine the gold, the brilliant audio-only podcaster might just disappear entirely into the static of the algorithm. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. As you move forward this week, whether you are prepping a keynote presentation, recording a new audio track, or trying to scale your business, take a hard look at your own workflow through this new lens. Ask yourself if your blueprint is a little too clean, a little too safe. Because in a digital landscape flooded with gray, standard talking heads, the only way to survive might be to bring the color. We will catch you next time.